The night had settled over Willow Creek like a heavy blanket, muffling sounds and leaving the world in soft darkness. Emma sat curled in the corner of her living room, a mug of tea warming her hands. The flickering fire painting her walls with shadows that danced like silent companions. Her husband Daniel had promised he would return from his business trip by midnight. But as the hours crawled by, his absence pressed against her chest like an invisible weight. She tried to focus on her book, but each time she read a paragraph, her mind wandered back to the empty chair across the room, to the ticking of the old clock, and to the quiet loneliness of the house. A sharp knock at the door startled her. Emma's heart jumped into her throat. Who could be visiting at this hour? She wasn't expecting anyone. She crept to the door and peered through the peephole. Standing there was a man she had never seen before, tall and confident, holding a leather briefcase. There was a calm in his posture, a quiet authority that contrasted with the storm brewing outside. His dark coat was damp from the rain, and his hair stuck slightly to his forehead. Despite the late hour, his eyes were steady and focused. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said politely as she opened the door a crack. His voice was deep, calm, and non-threatening. "I'm looking for Daniel Hughes. I'm a colleague. He asked me to stop by if he didn't make it back on time." Emma hesitated, unsure whether to let him in. The warmth of the house behind her and the wind and rain outside made her pause. But something about his presence, his quiet, professional demeanor, suggested safety rather than danger. She took a deep breath and stepped aside. "Please, come in," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The man introduced himself as Michael. He was polite, measured, and careful not to overstep any boundaries. Yet there was an energy about him, a subtle magnetism that Emma couldn't quite place. They sat in the living room, and as the storm raged outside, the fire's glow reflected across the polished wood floors and their faces. At first, their conversation was ordinary. Work, the weather, small talk. But gradually, Emma noticed something unusual. Michael listened, truly listened. Not just hearing words, but paying attention to her pauses, her expressions. The small details she didn't even realize she was revealing. She found herself speaking more freely than she had in months. She talked about the pressures of her work, the strain of Daniel's long trips, and her quiet fears that sometimes seemed too heavy to carry alone. Michael responded with empathy and gentle understanding. He never pushed or pried, but his attentiveness made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. There was a certain warmth in the room that had nothing to do with the fire. Hours passed. The storm outside intensified, rain lashing against the windows and wind rattling the shutters. Emma felt a shiver run down her spine, and Michael noticed immediately. "You shouldn't be standing near the window during the storm," he said softly, guiding her gently to the couch. His hands brushed hers for the briefest moment, nothing intimate, yet enough to make her heart skip. For the first time in a long while, she felt both safe and strangely alive. His presence was comforting, protective, and aware, a stark contrast to the loneliness that had filled her evenings. Emma realized that while Daniel had been away, she had longed for this, someone to notice her, someone to care without asking anything in return. The warmth she felt was complicated, stirring emotions she hadn't anticipated. As midnight approached, the storm outside became relentless. Thunder rolled across the skies and the lights flickered. Emma's worry about Daniel's delay returned, sharp and insistent. Michael, however, remained calm. He moved to check the fuse box, then returned with a flashlight when the power went out completely. He reassured her, never once making her feel unsafe. Instead, his calm presence grounded her, and she found herself clinging, emotionally, to the sense of protection he provided. She glanced at him, noticing the way the firelight highlighted his features, sharp, composed, yet approachable. His dark eyes seemed to catch every flicker of her expression, every slight tremor of her hands. Emma felt a rush of emotions she couldn't name, a mixture of gratitude, relief, and something more profound she dared not analyze. For a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them and the storm outside. And the usual distance she felt from other people disappeared. When the storm's intensity eased slightly, Michael looked toward the door, indicating that he should leave soon. "I should go," he said softly, the words heavy with unspoken understanding. Emma nodded, though a part of her didn't want him to leave. The connection had been quiet, subtle, yet powerful. He moved toward the door, rain dripping from his coat. And as he reached for the handle, he paused and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. The touch was careful, protective, and fleeting, but it left her breathless. The door closed behind him, and Emma stood frozen, staring at the empty doorway. Her chest still fluttered from that single, gentle touch. The fire crackled quietly. The storm had retreated into whispers. And yet a sense of change lingered in the room, subtle and profound. She sank into the couch, her thoughts racing. Something inside her had shifted during those few hours. Michael's presence had awakened feelings she hadn't recognized, the longing to be seen, to be acknowledged, to feel secure in someone else's care. She didn't understand why a stranger could have such an impact. Yet she felt her heartbeat echoed the memory of his hand, the calm in his voice, the careful attentiveness he showed her. The hours after he left were quiet, but Emma didn't sleep. She replayed every detail in her mind, the way he had spoken, the way he had listened, the warmth and security he had radiated. For the first time in months, she felt a strange combination of fear and exhilaration, loneliness and connection. When the first light of dawn touched the curtains, Emma rose from the couch and walked to the window. The storm had passed, leaving a wet, shining world behind. She thought of Michael standing outside in the rain, steady, composed, protective. That single night had left an indelible mark, not in actions, but in emotions. She realized that she would remember him, and that memory would change her perspective on her own life, her own relationships, and her own heart. She turned to look around the room, feeling a mix of clarity and confusion. She loved Daniel. She was committed to her life. But the night had shown her how fragile emotions could be. How quickly a stranger's presence could awaken dormant feelings. She realized she had to navigate these new emotions carefully, without acting recklessly, yet with full awareness of the stirrings within her. Emma spent the rest of the morning preparing for the day. She made breakfast, tidied the living room, and even answered a few work emails. But her mind kept drifting back to Michael, his calm voice, the steadiness of his presence, the touch that had lingered in memory. The world seemed brighter, more complicated, and more alive than before. By the time she heard the hum of her car engine and the distant sound of Daniel returning, Emma felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. She opened the door to greet him, yet in her mind, the night's events still played vividly. That evening she realized something crucial. Some encounters, brief and unexpected, could shift a person's inner world profoundly. And no matter how carefully she tried to dismiss the memory, Michael's presence, his calm, gentle attention had left her heart breathing differently than it had before. She closed the door behind Daniel, feeling the familiar warmth of home, yet aware that she had changed, that something new had awakened inside her, subtle but undeniable. She didn't understand the full scope of these feelings, nor did she need to. For now, she only knew that the night had passed, but its impact on her soul lingered, a quiet, persistent reminder that life could surprise her in ways she had never anticipated. The morning after that stormy night, Emma tried to shake off the feelings that had crept into her heart. She told herself it had been nothing more than a harmless encounter, a coincidence that had made a lonely night less frightening. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. Something inside her had changed. Michael's calm presence had stirred emotions. She didn't even realize she still possessed the need to be seen, to be understood, to feel safe in someone's company. Daniel returned home later that morning, tired but cheerful, his suitcase rolling behind him. Emma greeted him with a smile that felt both genuine and strained. He hugged her, spoke about his meetings, his deadlines, his exhaustion, but never once noticed the quiet in her eyes. As he talked, she nodded, trying to listen. Yet her mind drifted to that single night, the sound of rain, and the warmth of a stranger's voice that had felt more comforting than her husband's words now. Days passed, and life slipped back into routine. Daniel left early for work, came home late, and spent his evenings answering emails or making calls. Emma busied herself with her job at the local gallery, her morning jogs by the lake, her quiet dinners alone. Yet, no matter how she tried to push the memory away, Michael's image returned, the steady gaze, the soft tone, the way he had listened to her as if her thoughts mattered. One rainy afternoon, she received a message on her phone. It was an unknown number, but the moment she opened it, her pulse quickened. "Emma, it's Michael. I hope this isn't too forward. I just wanted to make sure you're doing all right after that night." She stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to respond. Her heart raced and her hands trembled slightly. She knew replying could open doors she shouldn't step through. But the kindness in his words felt like an anchor in her quiet, lonely world. After a deep breath, she typed back, "I'm fine, thank you." That storm was something, wasn't it? That was how it began, a simple, harmless exchange that quickly grew into something deeper. Over the following days, they texted occasionally. At first about casual things, the weather, work, books, even her favorite tea brand. But soon their conversations slipped into more personal territory. He asked about her dreams, her fears, and her marriage. She answered with hesitation at first, but his tone was never judgmental. He listened without interruption, and that alone felt like a gift. Emma found herself smiling at her phone more than she had in years. It wasn't about attraction. It was about feeling seen, appreciated, and understood. Michael had an uncanny ability to find the right words at the right time. He never flirted or crossed any lines, yet there was an emotional pull she couldn't deny. Every message left her wondering what he was doing, what he was thinking, and why she couldn't stop thinking about him. Weeks passed. Daniel remained distant, consumed by work. He had stopped noticing the little things, like the way Emma's laughter had grown softer, or how she lingered by the window more often. Their conversations were short and predictable. She realized they had become two people sharing a house but living separate lives. Then, one late afternoon, while Emma was locking up the gallery, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "I was hoping to see you." She turned around and froze. It was Michael. He looked exactly as she remembered, calm, confident, composed. He held a soft smile that made her both nervous and relieved. "I had a meeting nearby," he said. "I thought I'd stop by and say hello." Emma hesitated, unsure what to say. Her heart pounded, but she managed a polite smile. "It's good to see you," she said quietly. They ended up walking together to a nearby cafe. The air between them was charged with something neither wanted to name. Over coffee, they spoke easily, their conversation flowing naturally as if they had known each other for years. Emma felt herself relax in his company. No pretending, no polite restraint, just honesty. He listened to her talk about her life, her loneliness, and her fears of growing invisible. Michael's eyes softened. "You're not invisible, Emma," he said quietly. "You just stopped being seen by the person who was supposed to look the closest." His words hit something deep inside her. She looked down, stirring her coffee to avoid his gaze. He hadn't said anything wrong, but his truth lingered like an echo. When they stepped outside, the wind brushed against her hair and she shivered slightly. Michael instinctively reached out, steadying her by the arm. It was such a small gesture, brief and respectful, yet it sent a jolt through her. That touch carried warmth, sincerity, and a kind of safety she hadn't felt in years. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. They parted ways soon after, promising to stay in touch. But that night, as Emma lay in bed beside her sleeping husband, she couldn't silence her thoughts. Michael's words replayed in her mind, and she realized how true they were. She wasn't unhappy with Daniel out of anger. She was simply unseen. Her heart ached with a longing to feel something real again, something alive. The following week, Emma and Michael continued to meet occasionally. Coffee breaks, brief walks, moments that stretched into hours without either of them realizing. Each encounter deepened their bond. They spoke about everything except what was happening between them. There was no talk of love, no promise of more, but the silence between their words was filled with something unspoken, undeniable, One evening as they stood by the lake where Emma often jogged. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Michael turned to her, his eyes searching hers. "You know, this isn't easy for me either," he said softly. Emma felt her throat tighten. "I know," she whispered. Neither moved closer. Yet the air between them was alive with tension, not the kind born from impulse, the kind rooted in deep emotion, respect, and confusion. They were both aware of the line they hadn't crossed, but also of the closeness that felt impossible to ignore. As the wind rippled across the water, Emma looked away, tears stinging her eyes. "I don't know how I got here," she said. "I never meant for any of this to happen." Michael's expression softened. "You don't have to explain. Sometimes people find each other for reasons they can't control. Maybe I was meant to remind you of something, to wake up something that life made you forget." She didn't answer. Her heart felt heavy, yet somehow lighter too. That night when she returned home, Daniel was sitting in the living room, still working on his laptop. He barely looked up as she entered. "You're home late," he muttered. "I stayed to finish some things," she said. Her voice steady, though her mind was a storm. Daniel nodded absently, returning to his screen. The distance between them was no longer invisible. It was tangible. Emma watched him for a moment, then quietly walked upstairs. When she reached her room, she stood before the mirror studying her reflection. She wasn't sure what she saw anymore. A wife, a woman, lost in confusion, or someone rediscovering parts of herself she had long forgotten. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Michael, just making sure you got home safe. "Sleep well, Emma." She read the message 3 times before typing back, "I did. Thank you." Then she put the phone face down, turned off the light, and lay awake staring at the ceiling. She knew she was walking a fragile line, one she never thought she'd cross. Yet in her heart, she couldn't deny the truth. Michael had become a part of her world in ways she couldn't explain or undo. She closed her eyes, and once again she saw his face illuminated by the soft glow of the cafe light, his voice echoing the words that wouldn't leave her mind. "You just stopped being seen by the person who was supposed to look the closest." And with that thought, Emma realized something she didn't want to admit. She had already begun to drift toward a truth she couldn't control. The days after that message from Michael felt heavier than usual. Emma woke up every morning trying to convince herself that she could stop thinking about him. She told herself it was just friendship, a connection that had filled the silence in her life. But the truth was far deeper, and she knew it. Each time her phone buzzed, her heart leaped. Each time she saw his name, she smiled before reminding herself she shouldn't. Daniel remained distant, unaware of the quiet shift in his wife's world. He was planning another business trip, already buried in his laptop even before breakfast. Emma tried to start a conversation about the house, the upcoming gallery event, anything, but his replies were short, distracted, automatic. It felt like speaking into an empty room that evening. Emma stood by the kitchen window, watching rain trace lines down the glass. She thought about the last time it had rained this way, the night she'd met Michael. The thought made her chest ache. She knew she couldn't keep walking this path. Something had to change, even if she didn't know what that meant yet. A few days later, the gallery hosted its biggest art exhibit of the season. Emma dressed carefully, choosing a navy blue dress and a simple silver necklace. As she greeted guests and smiled politely, her mind wandered. Then she saw him, Michael, standing near one of the modern paintings, his hands tucked in his pockets, a quiet smile on his face. Her breath caught. She hadn't expected him to come. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment, it felt like the crowd around them disappeared. He approached her slowly, his expression gentle but unreadable. "You look happy tonight," he said. She smiled softly. "Do I?" He nodded. "You should. You belong in places like this, surrounded by beauty." His words made her heart flutter, not because they were romantic, but because they felt sincere. They spent most of the evening talking between the art displays, careful not to draw attention. Every moment felt effortless, yet dangerous. As the event ended and people began to leave, Michael offered to walk her to her car. The night was calm, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Emma hesitated before saying, "Michael, we can't keep doing this." He stopped walking, looking at her with quiet understanding. "I know," he said. "But it's not easy, is it?" She shook her head. "It's not about easy. It's about what's right. I have a husband. I made vows. I don't want to hurt anyone." Michael exhaled slowly. "You're not the kind of woman who betrays people. You just forgot what it feels like to be alive." His words broke something inside her. She blinked back tears, realizing he was right. She had been surviving, not living, moving through days without emotion. Michael hadn't caused her unhappiness. He had only reminded her of it. They stood in silence for a long time. Then, without another word, she whispered, "Goodbye, Michael." He nodded, his eyes filled with quiet pain. "Take care of yourself, Emma." When she drove home that night, tears rolled down her cheeks. Not because she had lost him, but because she had finally faced the truth. She loved a man she could never have. And she had to let him go before it destroyed what little remained of her marriage. The next morning, Daniel noticed her sitting by the window, staring at the garden. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm just tired," she replied. He looked at her for a moment longer than usual, as if seeing her for the first time in months. "You've seemed different lately," he said carefully. Emma met his eyes. "Maybe I have been. Maybe we both have." Daniel frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then said softly, "When was the last time we really talked, Daniel? Not about work, not about bills, about us." He opened his mouth to answer, but nothing came out. The silence that followed was louder than words. "I miss you," she said finally, her voice breaking a little. "I miss how we used to be, but I don't even know if we can find that again." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, guilt flashing across his face. "I know I've been distant," he said. "Work. It just keeps taking over." "It's not just work," she said. "It's everything. We stopped trying. We stopped seeing each other." He shook him. For the first time, he didn't try to argue or defend himself. Instead, he said quietly, "Do you still love me?" Emma looked down, her heart racing. "I want to," she whispered. "But love doesn't survive on memories. It needs to be fed, Daniel. And we've been starving for a long time." He stood there in silence, absorbing her words. Then, to her surprise, he reached out and took her hand. "Then let's fix it," he said. "If you'll let me try." His sincerity caught her off guard. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. For the first time in years, he wasn't distracted or distant. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and she saw the man she had once fallen in love with over the next few weeks. Daniel began making small changes. He started coming home earlier, cooking dinner with her, asking about her day. They took walks together again, sometimes in comfortable silence, sometimes in deep conversation. Slowly, a fragile warmth returned to their home. Emma, however, still carried the weight of her secret. She hadn't crossed a physical line with Michael, but emotionally. She had drifted farther than she ever thought she would. One evening, she sat on the porch, watching the sunset, and decided she needed to close that chapter completely. She picked up her phone and opened Michael's contact. Her fingers hovered over the screen for a long time before she typed, "Thank you for being kind when I needed it most. But I have to find myself again with the life I chose. I hope you understand." She hesitated, then pressed send. The message showed seen, but there was no reply. She didn't expect one. For a long moment, she sat there, tears slipping down her cheeks, feeling both heartbreak and relief. In the days that followed, Emma felt lighter. The ache was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She began painting again, something she hadn't done in years. Daniel noticed and smiled. "That's the Emma I remember," he said. She looked at him, realizing how much she had missed that smile. Maybe love wasn't about perfection. Maybe it was about showing up again after you've both lost your way. Months passed. One afternoon, while Emma was hanging a new piece at the gallery, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Michael Dat. Her breath caught for a moment, but this time her heart didn't race. She smiled gently, gratefully. "I saw your exhibit was open," he said. "I just wanted to say congratulations." "Thank you," she said warmly. "It means a lot." He looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "You seem happy." "I'm trying," she said. "One day at a time." "That's enough," he replied, smiling faintly before walking away. As she watched him go, she felt no regret, only peace. Their paths had crossed for a reason, and though it had caused confusion and pain, it had also awakened something important in her. That evening, when she returned home, Daniel was waiting with 2 cups of tea. He handed her one and said, I was thinking we could take a trip. Just us, somewhere quiet." She smiled. "I'd like that." They sat together on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of gold and violet. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was comfortable. Alive. Emma leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up." Daniel kissed her hair gently. "Thank you for giving me a reason to try." As the night deepened, Emma looked up at the stars and thought about how life sometimes leads you through storms just to remind you what truly matters. Michael had been a chapter brief, meaningful, but not the whole story. Her story wasn't about betrayal or loss. It was about rediscovery, forgiveness, and choosing love again, even after forgetting what it felt like. And for the first time in years, she felt free.